Hi, and welcome to another episode of Impact Club. May peace be upon you. I'm your host, Sabah Fatima. I'm excited to welcome our guest today. Asmaa Hussein is an author, blogger, social worker, and founder of Ruqaya's Bookshelf, a publishing company based in Canada. Her official title is Director of Awesomeness. Since 2015, Ruqaya's Bookshelf's mission has been to publish bright, fun, and engaging Islamic children's books. All her books feature diverse characters and protagonists because she believes Muslim representation matters. She believes diversity in children's literature contributes astronomically to a child's character education. Asma named her publishing company after her daughter Ruqaya because she loves books more than anything. Asma, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing well. Alhamdulillah. I'm really happy to be here.
I feel blessed to have you here, Asma. So tell me about your journey into diverse storytelling and representation for Muslim kids, how it began and what inspired you to pursue it.
That's a great question. It began when I was a child because I was a voracious reader. We had a library down the street from us, literally a 3-minute walk from our house. And we used to go there, me and my siblings, and take out like 10, 20 books at a time. And then we would go home and hole ourselves up in our room and just read and read and read until literally my mom would have to yell at us to come eat or to go to sleep or to do anything besides reading. And I love reading. I still love reading. Like I'm a serial. No, when people binge Netflix, not to say that I don't binge Netflix, because I do, but if I have a really good book, I will binge it and I will literally sit there for 7 or 8 hours just reading it straight. But when I was a kid, seeing characters like me in stories was just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. We didn't exist in stories, Muslims, right? And then let's not even get into a diverse ethnic background of Muslims. Just Muslims, period, did not show up in stories. And when they did, they showed up in negative ways, almost like 99.9% of the time, right? A Muslim girl who needs to be liberated from her family, who's being forced to do this, forced to do that, forced to marry someone she doesn't want, all of that kind of stereotypical tropes. And not to say they don't exist anymore, because they very much still do. They very much still do in literature, in movies, and in shows, Netflix shows, all of that. So growing up, I didn't even realize that it was a problem, really, because you don't know anything else, right? You read stories about white characters, and even though they're not like you can still suspend your thought and you can kind of go into a new world. But, when I had my daughter, I very quickly realized that I don't want that for her, because I think one of the reasons I struggled a bit, especially in my teenage years and even early 20s, struggled a bit with my identity, validating my identity, being okay with my identity, and not to say that I never loved being Muslim. I have always loved being Muslim, but it was, there's a lot of struggles when you're not seeing people who look like you at all. You're not feeling represented. You always feel like an outsider, always, in almost every space you go into, in the West, at least when I was growing up, like you always feel like an outsider. And I didn't want my daughter to feel like an outsider. I wanted her to feel like her identity was valid, and not just valid, but like something to celebrate. And so that's that. There's a lot more to say about this, of course, but that's really the crux of why I went into this field and why I specifically work with Muslim characters in stories only. And then on top of that, I'm really trying to incorporate a lot of ethnic and cultural diversity, even within those Muslim families that I represent. We still have a long, long way to go. And I acknowledge that we still have a long way to go. I still have a long way to go, but it's, baby steps.
And it's great that we're hearing these stories coming from a Muslim storyteller or a Muslim lens, because a lot of times, when it comes to ethnic backgrounds, even when it comes to, African American characters or Black characters or Black Muslim characters or Black characters in general, the authenticity is manifested when the storyteller is a Black person himself.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Who understands the culture, the traditions, who understands the environment like no other person would do. So I think that there is that gap as well. So we need
Oh,
more.
100%. 100%. And, I like to say that we're all experts in our own lives. Like no one from the outside of our families and outside of our communities is going to be able to, no matter how much research they do, is going to be able to truly capture the intricacies of like our family lives, our
Exactly.
cultures, and that kind of thing. It makes for me, I can tell you it makes a big difference when I work with an author who is writing about a culture that she comes from specifically. I mean, the difference is astronomical because she can tell me, okay, this part of the story isn't illustrated correctly because the street wouldn't look like that from where I'm from. The street would look like this, or that person wouldn't be dressed like this. It would be dressed like this. Even something as small as that I would 100% miss because there are countries I have never been to, places, people I've never interacted with. So like just from my firsthand perspective, working with authors who are writing about the places that they come from is such an enriching experience, and it gives so much more oomph to the story.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Oomph. That's the word we're gonna go with.
That is a great word.
Yeah.
Your recent hijab story went viral online and inspired so many. How difficult or easy has it been for you to embrace your identity as Muslim woman in a world full of scrutiny today?
So that hijab post was kind of funny because I did not mean for it to go where it did. I really didn't. Like, I was posting it for my small audience, the audience that has followed me for many years, that knows my perspectives, my worldviews, that's read other things, like people who've read many things by me or even read my books. And so they would automatically understand where I'm coming from. But I don't know why this particular post struck people's nerves so much. I actually have no idea why. Maybe it's that hijab is a topic that is so charged, right?
Yeah.
Politically charged. It's charged in our Muslim communities and an outside community. But oh boy, that was definitely interesting. The comments that I got and the message, like subhanAllah, it was very, very interesting. A lot of people didn't agree with what I wrote because I acknowledged that wearing the hijab was a struggle.
Yeah.
That it wasn't always easy. And this doesn't mean that I struggle with it every day. It doesn't mean that I want to take it off. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that physically it is a struggle sometimes, right? And I thought that like that's kind of an acceptable thing to say, right?
Yeah.
And of course, we still believe in it and we do it because Allah commanded us to. But a lot of people had problems with even that statement, that like, how could you say that you struggle with something that Allah commanded you to do? And it's strange. It's a bit
Yeah.
strange because that's not my worldview at all. For me, I think that we can struggle with identity and we can struggle with the commandments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us, but we can still do them and still gain immense reward. If it wasn't difficult to wake up for Fajr every day or to pray Isha when it's at 10 or 11 at night, if it wasn't difficult, then, if it was like snapping your fingers, then what's the reward in that? That we're supposed to challenge ourselves and we're supposed to make an effort. And if things come to us so easily that it's barely even anything, that's not really the purpose of this life. The purpose of this life is that we are tested and that we go through trials. And for some people, hijab might be that test. It might be something very difficult for them. And then for other people, hijab is incredibly easy and they struggle with something else, right? And all of that is fair. And all of those narratives and those stories are valid and fair. And we should be able to hear all of those without getting so personally offended, right? I mean, the majority of people love the post, and especially women really connected to the post, and I appreciate that, alhamdulillah. As a Muslim woman who's born and raised in the West, there have been times where it has been a struggle to wear the hijab and go out in public and just know that people are looking at you and judging you. And in every interaction that you have, at the back of your mind, you're always thinking, well, is this person treating me this way because I wear hijab? It's
Yeah.
and like we shove it all the way to the back, right, of our
Mm-hmm.
minds, because we have to survive and we have to interact and we have to be happy and we have to whatever. And alhamdulillah, I would say the majority of my experience has been great, right?
Mm-hmm.
Alhamdulillah. But I can't ignore the fact that there are Muslim women who are attacked because
Yes.
of the way that they look, and then, even just a few months ago, the attack in London, Ontario,
Mm-hmm.
somebody literally ran over a Muslim family and killed them. And then, like, you have to understand that when we go out as Muslim women, all of these fears and anxieties and thoughts are in our heads, even if they're in our subconscious, because we've kind of just
Yeah.
squashed them down, they're there. And it's a struggle because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sometimes there are legitimate fears,
Yes.
especially depending on where you live and whether there's stuff going on in the world. And there's so many things that we have to carry on our shoulders
Mm-hmm.
because we are Muslim women, because we're visible Muslim women, I should say,
Yeah.
that a lot of people will not understand.
Mm-hmm.
Truly, truly, truly will not understand. At the same time, I am not saying that I ever want to, or inshallah, I will never remove my hijab, not because it shows who I am, not because of all, simply because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded me to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Just like inshallah, I will, may Allah guide us and keep us steadfast. Like, it's not in my head to abandon my prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Not because it's easy, but because Allah commanded me to do
Yeah.
so. And in his commandments, I know that there's benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Even when something feels difficult, in the moments that it feels difficult, there's still benefit. And at the end of the day, like, I'm here in this world to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and
Mm-hmm.
to gain entrance into Jannah. That's why I'm here. I'm not here for any other purpose. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
here to look good or to I don't know. That's
Mm-hmm.
our purpose in this world is to worship Allah.
Yes.
Sometimes that worship is easy and sometimes it's hard,
Yeah.
but it doesn't matter. We still push forward and we still do it, and there's still beauty in it.
Yeah. And I think there is a lack of understanding about this aspect, right? So hijab, as you said, has been so politicized. It's hijab is about your it's more about your faith, your spirituality, your identity as a person, as a human being. So it has more to do with you and your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, in a way that it's personal to you, your family, the way you live your life, and it's something that you showcase to the world to be free in that identity, to be free as a Muslim, or as a visible Muslim, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found inspiring about your story was the fact, I just went like, yes. Yes, because it is a struggle, and yes, because I can relate to you, and you, and the inspiration came from that. Despite those struggles, I want to do this because of what I found in this, the purpose that I
Absolutely.
found in this, right? So
Absolutely.
that has been so relatable, so inspiring, and I'm glad that it blew up the way it did.
Alhamdulillah. I hope a lot of
Alhamdulillah.
people benefited from it.
So, Asma, what are some of your favorite books and authors?
Can I say all of my books and my favorite author is me? No, right?
That would say that, like, that would mean that you are the director of Awesomeness.
Oh my gosh, that would be funny. I so growing up, I'll tell you, one of my favorite authors was Roald Dahl. In all of his books, Charlie and Chocolate Factory, Matilda, Big Friendly Giant, George's Marvelous Medicine, like, because his stories were so funny and wacky and interesting and just like out of this world and really pushed your imagination out of this world, right? And then Robert Munch, love him. You know what? I always like kind of go towards the really funny stories, especially for kids. Like, I love when they're just colorful and humorous and just silly and nice. So Robert Munch has been a big person, like an author that I look up to. Roxana Khan, I gotta say,
Mm.
especially for kids' books and representing Muslims in books. I remember reading her book, Muslim Child, I think. And this came out, I don't even know, maybe in the 90s. So this
Mm-hmm.
was like one of the first Muslim books I ever read. And it's a book with like multiple stories in it and poems and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And to this day, we have it on our bookshelf. So good. And she, I think, was a great example to me in terms of like she was the pioneer essentially of
Mm-hmm.
Muslim stories in the mainstream publishing industry. So I really, really look up to her. Um, yeah, those are some of my favorites.
Those are great classics.
Alhamdulillah.
What were the challenges you had to overcome starting your own publishing company, Ruqaya's Bookshelf?
Challenge number one, I did not know what I was doing. I had no clue. I was starting from scratch. I had no clue how to start a website, how to register a business, how to get an ISBN for my books, like the barcode. All of those, like I had no idea what I was doing. And yet there was something inside of me that said, this is really interesting and this is really cool. And maybe you should like
Mm.
research this. And so I did, and I started researching literally from scratch, right? I Googled, oh gosh, how I Googled. I Googled so much, and I read books from the library.
Mhm.
I'll be honest with you, I spent almost no money in the
Mm.
research, like in researching, because there are so many free resources right now, especially if you're blessed to live in a place that has like public libraries.
Mhm.
You can like I remember reading a book called Writing Children's Books for Dummies. And it was like,
Wow.
even though like, so my background is actually like I studied English. I love writing. I've always written, since I was a teenager till now. Like it was always a passion of mine. Um, so the challenges were many, and I will admit I've made a lot of mistakes.
Mhm.
I've had websites like that were really blah looking.
Mhm.
I've made mistakes where I hired wrong printing companies that messed up my books, and or designers who would not submit work on time. Like there's so many challenges. But the reason that I kept going is because I genuinely, not only do I love the work, because I love
Mhm.
a lot of things, I love a lot of things. I have hobbies, like I love different things, but this is work that I believe in. And when I say
Mm.
believe in, this is work that I think is actually will change our communities. And
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about Ruqaya's bookshelf. That's a very big thing for me to say about
Mhm.
Ruqaya's bookshelf. That's not what I mean. I mean working in this industry, books, media, movies, shows, cartoons, nasheeds, whatever it may be, like content,
Mhm.
right, for children and for adults, but especially for children. It's actually transformative. And if you actually look into research that's been done on storytelling and how it affects our minds, right? It's really fascinating. It is
Mhm.
truly, truly fascinating. Like when you tell a story to somebody, they're more likely to remember the concepts and the material in that story simply because it was told to them in the structure of a story, and not
Mhm.
because you came as a parent, for example, and told your child you need to do this and you need to do that, and just gave them a list of chores or a list of things. Like Muslims have to be honest, and then left it
Yeah.
at that. Whereas if you tell them a story about a character who was faced with a decision and decided to be honest, it's been literally scientifically proven
Mhm.
that it's going to be more ingrained in their memories, right?
Yeah.
And especially when emotions are attached to stories, that's
Mhm.
really when learning is solidified and these memories are solidified. It's actually incredibly interesting. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I have like articles that I've saved of this research because I find it fascinating, and I think that books are such an integral learning tool for
Mhm.
children and for families that it's not something we can ignore,
Yeah.
right? And even if you think like, oh man, Sela, you opened a can of worms right now. Like, honestly, if you think about the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us in the Quran, it's
Mhm.
through storytelling.
Yeah.
like he tells us stories of prophets and prophets, messengers, righteous people. He tells us stories about nations that have been destroyed, like
Yeah,
so many stories. You know, at the end of the day, like really, we could have just had a list of commandments
exactly.
with no reasoning, with no anything. But why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose to tell us these things through stories? Because he created us. He knows how our minds work and our psyches. And when we connect to a story emotionally, we're going to remember it. We're going to remember the lessons that were encapsulated in it.
Yes. And I guess that's true from the perspective of history itself. Why do we document people's lives? So that we can learn from them, right?
Absolutely.
And that's fascinating. And the psychological aspect of it is so fascinating, because we never think how our brain makes these connections. I mean, it's through the emotions, how we view this character, how we get attached, or sometimes how we hyperfixate on a character or a
Yes.
book.
Yeah. And kids do that. They
Yeah.
hyperfixate. Like you will find, and then parents will complain to me, actually. They'll complain and they'll say, your books should be illegal because my child has asked me to read it 100 times and I'm really annoyed. And I'm like, listen. First of all, that's actually a sign that they're learning something. And kids do that, right? Because
Yeah.
that routine gives them a sense of comfort and control, and they love that. And imagine if your child is reading a book with a good moral 100 times versus reading some random story. Not that there's anything wrong with other books. Books are wonderful regardless, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just like, just from a parenting perspective, imagine that your books are exposed to children. Isn't that a funny thing? Your children are exposed to books with positive messaging constantly.
Yeah.
And this is what they're intaking into their hearts and their minds. Like, how powerful is that?
That is powerful. And and we need that as much as we can get it. And I'm glad that you're doing it. Alhamdulillah and
Alhamdulillah.
mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. I love it.
Um,
Honestly, it's what it is I love it. And like that's that. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't do it. So alhamdulillah, it's mutually beneficial. It benefits me because it fulfills me, and hopefully it benefits families too.
Inshallah. And Ruqaya, you lost your husband at a young age and found healing after it. Your words helped others find healing too. As life goes on, how does one keep up the strength and purpose despite that recurring pain of loss?
You know, it's interesting. Some people like message me sometimes and they ask me, does it ever get easier? Because, you know, I think since I've put out a lot of writing on this topic, on grief, and I've shared a lot of my own experiences, I have a lot of people reaching out to me and saying, you know, I lost my husband, or I lost my child, or I know somebody who lost their family member. What can I do? Does it ever get better? And I always respond like, absolutely, it gets better. And alhamdulillah, like that's the power and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he's not going to leave you in pain forever.
Yeah.
You know, and we also have to work towards trusting Allah and knowing that whatever comes our way and whatever he's written for us is something that is a benefit to us, even if we can't see it right now.
Yeah.
And I won't lie, it was a very long and difficult journey, you know, and there were times that I really questioned, like, why did this have to happen to me? And you know, like internally you have a lot of dark thoughts. But it's normal, like it's normal to have thoughts run through your head, but you always have to mitigate that with making sure that you're remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and remembering that you have a purpose, you know, and not totally leaving yourself to just wallow in grief and increase in that. Finding ways to seek help, with whether it's through a therapist or writing or friends or whatever it may be, being brave enough to seek help, because a lot of times, like, there is still stigma around help, you know, and people, you know, people on the outside, they'll look at you after a few months and be like, can you just get back to normal now? Like, can you just, like, they don't understand that it's an ongoing thing, and that now, like, alhamdulillah, my daughter and I are really happy and we're living a full life, alhamdulillah. But that doesn't mean that once in a while I don't have like painful memories, or
Mm-hmm.
things don't get difficult sometimes because I'm a single mom, or anything like that. Like, but I think that every person on this earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests them with what they can
Mm-hmm.
handle
Yeah.
and what has the potential to bring out benefit in their lives. And
Mm-hmm.
it depends on how we look at our tests, right? We might have tests that we shun and that we reject and that we get
Get
incredibly
angry
angry
with.
about.
Yeah.
Exactly. And not, you know what, anger is also a normal part of like our emotional range, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not to say that we can never be angry and we have to be docile and like patient, which means, people misunderstand patience. They think it
Yeah.
means like being totally happy all the time, zen. Like, that doesn't exist. We're human
It
beings.
doesn't.
Allah created us to feel pain and grief and sadness and anger and joy, and every emotion on the spectrum is accepted. But just don't take those emotions and turn them against Allah, and
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, Allah's punishing me, or like, I can't believe a merciful Lord would do this. There's so many negative things that you
Mm-hmm.
can do, but then on
Mm-hmm.
the other hand, there's so much positive things you can do, even in the same emotional state,
Yeah.
right? So it's about our words and our actions, and not about what's in our hearts. Because in our, like, don't try to control what's in your heart. If you
Mm-hmm.
feel angry, then you're angry. If you feel sad, then you're sad,
Yeah.
right? But it's a matter of, what are you going to do with that emotion? Are you going to turn it into something that's going to benefit you or not?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh gosh, I have so much to say about everything. It's fun.
It's so I think it helps you realign yourself when we think that this could be the end of my world, but then when I can realign myself, when I remember my purpose and I get
Yes,
back to it, it's like I know there is going to be hardships, and I know this is said a lot of times, but after hardship comes ease. and i
absolutely.
and it's like, if i have to if I have to live through a certain pain, and as you said,
Yes,
have those emotions and be patient with it, that is not going to stop me from living fully when it comes
yes,
to other things in life. So I think it's not easy. It never will be easy, but just being in that zone of, I have my purpose, I have a job to do, it keeps you it helps you to keep going.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and
We are three-dimensional. That's something
yeah.
to understand. We're not one-dimensional robots who don't feel and who don't experience. Like, we are three-dimensional human beings, and Allah created us that way.
Yes.
That's the important thing. When people come and tell us that's enough, like, you shouldn't be sad anymore, khalas, like, don't listen to them. You feel what you need to feel,
Yeah.
and do your best to turn that into something positive in your life.
Alhamdulillah. Asma, what kind of research do you do when writing characters and stories for children?
Um, so if I'm writing a story with a character who I'm not familiar with their culture, for example,
Mm-hmm.
like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, I'll get in the story Who Will Help Me Make Iftar, we have
Mm-hmm.
a character. His name is Mustafa, and he's an old man, and he's making iftar for his friends and neighbors on the first day
Mm-hmm.
of Ramadan. And for some reason, I really wanted the story to take place in Turkey. I've never been to Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually partnered with a Turkish woman who to help me like read through that story,
Mm-hmm.
and to make sure even that the foods that I was mentioning
Yeah.
were foods that they would eat in Ramadan, or the way that we would refer to older people. Because,
Mm-hmm.
like, you're not going to call somebody like just by their first name. In most of our cultures, or many of our cultures, I should say,
Yeah.
we give them like some kind of term of respect or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would be different. And then for that story, I was lucky enough to actually find an illustrator who also lived in Turkey. And
Mm-hmm.
so she was able to illustrate like the streets, the markets, the masjid, like, in a way that I didn't have to describe to her how to do it, because she intrinsically knows, because she lives there. And so I I try to use different resources to make sure that the story feels as authentic as possible. In terms of the research, I would say with children's stories, one of the hardest things is getting the character right and getting what they say right. Because like I'll read some children's books that the kids are talking as if they're like 20 years old, as if they're like very mature and like they know right from wrong and all this stuff. And then I listen to my daughter and how she talks. And she's a child. She's not mature, you know, she's not going to speak in a way that like a teenager would speak, or an adult. And so getting the wording right really takes like observation skills. You actually have to sit with children and listen to how they speak, you know, and also not be afraid to make that child say something that's wrong, because that's the point. Like you want to show that a child is, again, coming back to this idea that they're three-dimensional, right? They're not just like robots who are, yes, mother, I shall do this. Like they, you know, kids push and they rebel and they like, it takes them time to get to the right conclusion sometimes. So observation, you actually have to sit and observe the way that people speak, the way that parents speak to their children. Like that's something that they'll tell you when you're writing, is to actually go out and sit like at a cafe or at a park or whatever and just listen to how people around you are speaking, so that you can get that dialogue correct. Those are some of the ways that I do some research.
And those are great, because you mentioned a great point about how sometimes we see stories, or where we see or read stories where we don't find that authenticity, because we know there has been a lack of research in that area, or you know, there is a mix of I don't know, I feel
or
a
the
lot
kids
of
sound too mature. The kids sound too mature.
They sound too mature, and they're put in situations that normally a kid wouldn't be put in, even if it's a fictional book.
Could
right?
be, yeah. Could be.
And it's
I mean, there is something to be said about stretching the imagination as well, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes things will happen in books that will actually most likely not happen in like real life. And that's okay too. That's okay too. Because you want books to be funny and silly sometimes, and like, you know, push your thoughts. And by the way, I also want to say that I'm still very much learning how to write for kids, and how to create characters that are like realistic, funny, authentic. Like you know, people think that writing for kids is easier than writing for adults. That is not the case. Writing for kids is very difficult. I find writing for adults a lot easier, actually. Because I am an adult, and so I know, I know the kinds of thoughts that will pop into my head and the kinds of things that wouldn't, and like you automatically have an in, right? But I haven't been a child for a very long time, and I don't remember what I used to think. And so like it takes a lot. It really takes a lot, and a lot of editing, and a lot of willingness to accept critique, and to accept that you don't know everything, and that sometimes you're going to write an entire story and spend months on it and it's going to be no good. Like it's just like, it's a very humbling experience, I gotta say. It's a very humbling field to be
in. So what does literary success look like to you, and have you achieved it?
Oh, I don't know about if I've achieved it or not. But to me, literary success is not about awards. I honestly couldn't care less about awards. It's not about recognition. It's about, did your book do good in the world or not? Did your book affect somebody's heart or not? Did your book allow for a parent and child to have a really good moment together or not? And to me, that's success. Right? And of course, did you do it with the right intention or not? But like materially, like if I have a child, if I go to a story time and I see a child and they look at me and they say, I have all your books and I read all of them so many times, and I love this one and I love that one, and my mom and this, and like, and starts like really telling me how my books are a part of their life, to me, that's success. To me, that's success. It's not about how many books I sell. Sometimes I think, okay, I'm going to put this book out there, And if I sell like 5 copies of this book, but people really love it and it affects them in a positive way, like I'm okay with that. And I don't know, I think this is probably not a healthy way for a business person to think, because like at the end of the day, you have to make some profit so that you can keep working, so that you can keep like producing books and stuff. And of course that is important. I can't deny that. But did the book, like, was the book in homes where it caused good things to happen? Or just like happy moments between siblings, between parents? Like to me, that's success. It's as simple as that.
So success is the impact of your work and how it
Success is the
affects
impact.
lives.
Exactly. And I like, I love the idea of sadaqah jariyah, that you have this ongoing charity. And for me, like, if a child reads a book and it impacts them in some kind of subconscious way, and they carry that lesson up until they're older, and then when they have kids, they impart that lesson on their own children. Like, to me, that is an immense amount. Like, that's an immense form of sadaqah jariyah. It really is. And I have no way of knowing if that's going to happen, or how to. That's not something you can track. That's like an unknown thing. And the only time we're ever going to know it is when we're standing in front of Allah. Did this thing have a positive impact, and am I going to be rewarded for it, or it didn't, or I had the wrong intentions, or whatever. So yeah, it really is about impact.
And that's what you said is a special thing when it comes to content and books in general, that they get passed on and on and on, living in this digital medium that we are in today. So it's like, and it's a challenge, but I'm glad that you've taken the challenge up.
Alhamdulillah, I'm really glad too.
Asma, last question for today. What do you think are the obstacles that aspiring entrepreneurs like yourself from diverse backgrounds should be aware of?
I think a lot of obstacles are in our own heads. And that's actually the scary part. A lot of obstacles are in our own heads. And we have a massive issue of imposter syndrome, especially women, especially women. We always assume that we're not qualified to be doing what we're doing. We like hold back from entering spaces that are going to benefit us, or entering leadership roles that we think we're not worthy of. And to me, that's honestly the number one obstacle. It's not even an external obstacle. It's an internal one. Absolutely. But that's not to say there are not external obstacles. There are, especially for families who are recent immigrant families. Like, a lot of us still really have that mentality of, what is your job? What field are you? And entrepreneurship is still not generally something accepted in our communities. Like, people still want to know, honestly, sometimes people still ask me, when are you going to get a job? I'm not even kidding. Some people will still ask me, like, so are you going to go back to your field anytime? Like, because my field is social work. And sometimes I tell them, and I look at them and I tell them, like, I don't think you realize that I do have a job and I work full time. Sometimes I work more than full time. Like, it's like an all-encompassing, like, it's taken over my entire life, Don't get me wrong, I love it. But like, this idea that you have to be in a particular field, and if you deviate from that, sometimes you are going to face family members or community pressure to not do it, But at the same time, I think that this is changing pretty rapidly now. Now I see a lot of Muslim women. There are Muslim men as well, but I think in my kind of scope, because I interact with a lot of women, I'm seeing a lot of Muslim women start businesses and really thrive. And it's wonderful. And the thing is, like, we think there are so many obstacles, and we think it's going to be so costly to start, and we have no idea what we're doing. Guess what? Everyone's starting from there. Nobody knows what they're doing. That's the secret. The secret is nobody knows what they're doing when they start.
Yeah.
And you have so many free resources. Like a lot of times we'll look into like, okay, I need to pay for this course, and I need to hire this coach, and I need to do this and that and this and that. And then like the amount of money we're going to spend piles up in our head, and we're like, we don't have that money. So how can we possibly do this? Then don't do it. Use the free resources that are at your fingertips. There are like, if you spend 10 years just trying to consume like the free stuff, you won't be able to. Like there's so many resources, so exhaust that. And then when you feel really comfortable, then just go for it. And the thing is, like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already written our rizq for us. And if we just do our research and put our trust in him and put our best foot forward, we're not going to be disappointed. It's not to say that we're not going to fail. There are projects that I've done that have failed, or that like I couldn't see through, or cost me a lot of money but did not have like the return that I was looking for at all. But all of the failures were really the ways that I learned. Right? And we have to be willing to kind of suck in our ego a little bit and be willing to fail and face critique. But first and foremost, we just got to get over that imposter syndrome. You are talented. Like Allah created every single one of us with a talent and skill to do something beneficial in this world, or in our families, or within our own selves, right? You have to have that trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Alhamdulillah. And speaking of that imposter syndrome, and as you mentioned it made me think that a lot of this somehow subconsciously comes from a place of guilt, where we think that striving for this level of excellence and going after your full potential means that you are holding back, you are not fulfilling some of your other responsibilities as women. You know, like there is this stigma around, you know, a woman being able to push herself, go forward, break walls. There's stigma.
Right?
Have it all, exactly. So, and then a lot of women feel like, oh no, I cannot do certain things because I will be failing others in this regard.
So, but we should have had an entire podcast just on that question. Let's be honest.
I know, right?
It's a big question. And sometimes I don't even know how to respond. That's a very big question. I think it's a lot of community pressure to fulfill our family obligations, not just fulfill them, but excel in such a way that is actually unreasonable, right? And I think that I'm not going to stand here and say women can have it all and you can do everything. You can be working full-time and taking care of children full-time and doing this and doing that. I think the idea of having it all is actually a really negative space to be in, mentally and emotionally, because nobody can have it all, men or women. It's not about being a woman. Nobody. We all want to exercise and eat healthy and work and volunteer and raise our children and teach our children and take them out and go on vacation. Like we all want to do everything. That's the truth. I want to do all of those things. But what has priority in my life right now? Right? Sabah. I have a lot of things to say, and I'm just editing myself in my head because I want to remain appropriate. But I think that the amount of pressure that's put on women to be the perfect wife and the perfect mother, and to never let their kids have screen time, and to make like gourmet homemade meals like for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day, and all of those pressures are actually incredibly unreasonable for most women, I would say. And they hinder us from doing things in our community that need to be done. And I'm definitely not advocating for not taking care of your kids and not doing like fostering a healthy family environment. I'm absolutely not advocating for that. But I'm saying that if we do things in the right measurements and in a reasonable, wholesome way, we do still have space to do other things. And there are periods in our lives where we will have to give priority to our families, right? Especially when we have like really young kids.
Exactly.
It will be difficult, to be honest with you, to run a business and take care of like a newborn, right? If you're privileged enough to be able to hire help, use that as a resource.
Yes.
I would say most of us are not, generally speaking, not privileged enough to be able to afford that. And so you might have to take a pause and come back, and that's okay. And life is in phases,
Yes.
right? When my daughter went to school full time, started going to school full time, that's really kind of when I started like ramping up my work. Before that, I still had work that I was doing, but oftentimes I would I was so productive back then. Like I can't even, like I would, like the minute she went down for a nap, I would sit at my computer and like work ferociously. And then she woke up from the nap and I would close my laptop and go do something with her. Like when we just find periods of time that we can do what we're passionate about, that's okay. And we don't have to make it the most viral thing, the biggest thing, the whatever. The small and consistent work is really what matters.
Yes.
And do what's right for you and what's right for your family, but also know that it's okay to scale back on like all things fancy for the family if you want to put a little bit of effort into something else. And I think that when women are emotionally and spiritually and mentally fulfilled, they are much happier people.
Yes.
And people who can really thrive in their families. And that fulfillment is different for every woman.
Exactly.
That fulfillment might come from working, volunteering, being home with their kids, homeschooling. There's so many things that fulfillment can come from, and it's okay. It's perfectly okay for you to find fulfillment in that range of things. But the important thing is that as women, especially as mothers, that we don't forget how important feeling fulfilled in our hearts really is.
That is so profound, and thank you for answering that question in such a beautiful way in such a short time. I'm so grateful to have you here in this episode. Thank you so much for being here, Asma. Jazakallah khair, and I hope to do this again with you, inshallah. Inshallah. Thank you so much, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And I shall see you next time, and please don't forget to subscribe everywhere that you listen to this podcast. Thank you all.